Hi guys, it's Amber from Amber Eats Books, and I'm here today to bring you my February wrap-up. I've had a busy month of February. It just seemed like one thing after another happened. I still managed to read 9 books though, which I'm really proud of. So let's jump right in. Normally I start with my lowest ranked books and work my way up to my highest. However, this month I only had 4 and 5-star reads, so I don't really have a lowest ranked book. All of these books were really good, so they're not in any real particular order, but I will start with my 4-star reads. And the first book I'd like to talk about is Kitty Cornered by Bob Tart. I read this with my friend Elizabeth from Lizzie Faye Loves Books. It was so much fun doing a buddy reads with her, especially on this book because it had so many little great tidbits that we could pull out of it and discuss. It was just wonderful, and I can't wait to do a buddy read with her again. This is the story of how Bob and his wife kind of collected all of their cats that they owned. He has also written other books because they own birds. They own like ducks and other birds that live within the house. And so he always kind of thought of himself as a bird man, and then they started getting these cats. And the way these cats were coming to them was just so funny and hilarious, and his humor was so good. I found myself laughing out loud so many times while reading this. That does not usually happen for me. I can cry a lot easier than I can laugh when it comes to reading. So I was so pleasantly surprised. I really want to go back one day and reread this because as I was reading it, I wasn't really tabbing things or underlining things, and there were so many great lines that I would love to go back and do that. So I definitely recommend it, and I can't wait to check out his other book that he wrote about the ducks that they own. The first line in this book is, "I had my first encounter with a cat when I was 2.5 years old." The next book is actually an audiobook that I listened to, and that is The Songs of Willow Frost by Jamie Ford. I had heard of this book, I think, on my friend Aoife's channel. Her channel name is Fred Weasley Died Laughing. I'll leave a link down below. And she had raved about it, and she thought it was really good. So I was like, I saw it on Overdrive, and I was like, oh, I'll pick it up. I need a book to read anyway. And I'm so glad that I did. This follows the story of William and his mother, Willow. She does have another name, but her stage name is Willow. And William is at an orphanage at the beginning of the book. He has these slight memories of his mother, but he doesn't really know what happened to get him to this orphanage. He just knows that one day he was taken away, and he kind of believes that his mother is dead. However, then they go out on this outing to the movies, and he sees what he thinks is his mother on the screen, which is just crazy to all of a sudden see your mother up on the screen when you thought she was dead. And then you kind of go through and go back in time and see what happened to get all of the story to this point where he sees his mother. It was fantastic. I think it was so sad but yet beautiful at the same time. So many things just kept happening to this poor mother and child to have things end up the way that they are, but I really, really enjoyed it, and I would definitely check out another book by Jamie Ford. I do not have the first line because it was an audiobook. The next book I'd like to discuss is The Arenda by Joseph Boyden. This book was one that I was trying to buddy read with my friend Jessie from Jessie's Shelf. However, Jessie decided it just was not for her, which is totally understandable. So she ended up DNFing it. I continued on. I will say the writing in this is quite dense. It's not something that you can just fly through. So I could definitely understand why Jessie at that point just was like, I just can't do this right now. I have too much other stuff going on. And I almost was going to do that, and then I said, you know what, I am really enjoying what I'm reading when I'm reading it, so I'm just going to kind of push through. And I'm glad that I did because I really ended up appreciating this story. This is the story of the Native people in Canada and how in this one tribe, how religion has been trying to, Christianity I should say, is trying to worm its way into their tribe. It was just interesting to see because we all know the outcome of this story. It was just interesting to see how this happened, like what could have been happening, how people that were so strong and so concrete in their beliefs would maybe then let other people come in and take over. I also found just the cultural stuff very fascinating, and some of the scenes that were written about the fights between the two tribes was just fascinating, but also a little gruesome at the same time. It was like the way the author wrote these scenes, I could picture things so vividly that I had to take a little break while reading it and continue on after I had gone, like I went to bed and then woke up and continued it because it was a little much before bedtime for me. But it was just a really great book, and like I said, I ended up rating it 4 stars. I would definitely try something else by Joseph Boyden, but now knowing the writing style, I may try to pick it at a time when I'm not so busy and having so much going on. The first line in this book is, "We had magic before the crows came." The next book I'd like to talk about is The Winter Sea by Susanna Kearsley. I picked this up for the Books and Jams read-along group hosted by Krista from Books and Jams. I will leave her link down below. And this was categorized as historical fiction. So I was kind of eager to pick it up because I hadn't read a good historical fiction in a while. I will say that this book was very enjoyable. I did really like it, but what I'm about to say may sound like I didn't enjoy it as much as I did. No, I did really enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. However, this book was split into 2 separate stories. So the first storyline is about this woman who is an author, and she is trying to write a book, and she's kind of getting like these visions about it, plus her own little side romance story and whatnot. Then the second story is the actual book that she's writing, like excerpts from it. I just didn't think this worked quite so well as the story progressed. In the beginning, I liked it, but towards the end, I was just kind of over that format. I still really, really enjoyed the book. I thought that her writing was great as far as it being immersive and informative. I will say there were a couple of times where she had these large like info dumps that I just hated. I hate when an author does that. Like, there has to be another way to tell you about certain things without just dumping all of these facts and info right on top of each other in this short period of time. Once, you get over that little chunk, then the story was great and it flowed, but those info dumps were just a little too much. But yet, overall, I still really enjoyed the story. I do want to try something else out by this author, so if you have another recommendation for a Susanna Kearsley novel, leave it down below, because I would definitely like to give her another go to see if she's an author that I would want to continue with in the future. I do not have the first line because I already returned the book to the library. The next book that I listened to this month was Killers of the Flower Moon, The Osage Murders, and the Birth of the FBI by David Grann. This was a very interesting nonfiction book. I will say the audiobook was fantastic because they had 3 different narrators for 3 different parts of the book, which I really enjoyed that. It kind of added another layer to the story that it needed. This was interesting because it just shows, again, another story where Native American people were not treated well. But there was also a lot of other things that went into it. So many behind the scenes kind of stuff with the FBI. It was just very, very interesting. I learned a lot while reading this. I don't want to go into too much because I feel like you don't need to know a whole lot going in. It's better that way. It kind of lets you have a blank slate and lets them get that story across to you. But I ended up really enjoying it, and I gave it 4 stars. I do not have the first line of this book because it was an audiobook. The next book that I finished was The Snow Child by Ewan Ivey. This was a fantastic read. I gave it 4 stars. It didn't quite hit the 5-star mark for me, but it was like just below 5 stars for me. I loved the concept of this childless couple going out into the snow, creating a snow child, and then it seemingly comes to life. It was just written in such a way that it kept me turning the pages and made me think about what would happen to me in this sort of situation. It's so far-fetched, but what would I have chose to do? How would I have reacted? Some people were thinking that they were crazy. They kept saying they had this child that kept visiting them. And how would I have been able to deal with the situation? It was really wonderful. It's definitely a book that I recommend reading during the winter time. Here in the Northeast, it was cold, it was a little snowy, so it just really fit the time in this book. I really enjoyed it. I do not have the first line because I already returned it to the library. The next book that I finished was The Elite by Kiera Cass, and this is book 2 in the Selection series. I read The Selection, which was book 1, last month. I listened to it on audio, and I absolutely fell in love with this book, and I was like, I have to read book 2. So unfortunately, they didn't have the audiobook, so I requested it from my library, and I read this book in less than 24 hours. It was that quick. I think I described it on Instagram as literary popcorn. I just kept consuming it. I cannot stop, and I can't stop now. I have already requested book 3, and I can't wait till it comes in. This is just a fun, silly young adult novel where 1 out of 35 girls are going to become this next princess, and you're just kind of like in this competition and reading all about it. Book 2 kind of contains a big love triangle, which is something that I'm just trash for. I do not know why. I love love triangles. I hate insta-love, can't stand it, hate books that contain it, but if it has a love triangle, I'm all about it. I don't know, it's totally weird and irrational, but I love them so much. So this was so good, and I cannot wait to get my hands on book 3. I do not have the first line because I already returned it to the library. And my last 4-star read of the month was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. It kind of saddens me to say that this was only a 4-star read. Her book, Everything I Never Told You, was a 5-star, probably my favorite book ever right now. So it did sadden me a little that this one only got 4 stars. The synopsis of this book is a little hard to put into words. There's just two families where their lives are kind of intersecting, and there's a lot of secrets and miscommunications and life lessons that are trying to be taught and learned. It was very interesting, but I feel like there was just sections of this book that were too long. It could have been cut down a little bit. I felt like Everything I Never Told You, there was nothing that was unnecessary in that book, and I just flew through it. This book, I had to kind of like make myself read a little bit here or there because it was just getting boring in certain parts, which pains me to say because I really wanted this to be a 5-star read. However, I still did enjoy her writing. I did end up liking the characters, at least feeling for them. I was not as invested in these characters as I was with Everything I Never Told You, but I still feel like this is definitely worth a read. There are lessons and things that make you kind of sit back and just go, how would I deal with this? How are my viewpoints in life different from theirs? Would I take anything away from theirs? Would I have made the same decisions as those characters made? So it did make me think, which is definitely why it got 4 stars. The first line in this book is, everyone in Shaker Heights was talking about it that summer, how Isabel, the last of the Richardson children, had finally gone around the bend and burned down the house. The last book that I read in February is definitely my favorite read, and that was The Bear and the Nightingale by Kathleen Arden. Now, this book has been hyped recently all over BookTube, I think because the 3rd and final book is coming out in the trilogy. People have just been revisiting it, and I have to tell you, this book, it deserves all the hype that it gets. I loved this book. This is based on like Russian folklore and fairy tale, and I don't really want to give you a synopsis because it's kind of nice going into the book not knowing a whole lot and just discovering these characters as they come at you. I will say it just contains so much adventure and magic and this strong female character. I just loved it so much. I actually have book 2 ready to read for March, and I cannot wait to pick it up. I'm so excited. So if you guys have not read this book, you should definitely go out and read it. Unfortunately, it was a library book, so I forgot to write down the first line. I don't have it, but I will definitely be buying my own copy at some point, and I'm sure I will reread it, and you guys will get the first line then. Anyway, those were all the books that I read. What did you guys read this month? Did you read anything you loved, anything you didn't like? Let me know down in the comments below so we can have a discussion. I hope you guys have a great March, and happy reading.